So we've heard a lot of stories in the last 6 months of studio closures, of layoffs, of downsizing, things that executives would call divestment, which is basically when a company invests in something, realizes they didn't actually have the money to do that, and then they frantically uninvest. That's what divestment is. It's just divestment sounds more sophisticated and more expensive. So that's what they say. So there's been a lot of divestment in the gaming industry recently from big institutional publishers and multinational holdings groups. So we're just kind of accustomed to bad news, just bad news after bad news after bad news. One of the most surprising things, though, is when we hear about the opposite, when we hear about a doubling down from a company or a group for a game, them hiring more people. And that's actually just happened. Arrowhead, the developers of Helldivers 2, are actually staffing up and hiring more people to accelerate the rollout of new content for the game after the overwhelming success it has enjoyed in the last week or two. Yeah, divestment sounds better than oopsie whoopsie. Yeah, exactly. So this is a bizarre case. Unfortunately, it's bizarre in the modern gaming industry, but we actually have an instance of a company doubling down, hiring more people, investing more money into a title, and I'm glad to see it. Helldivers 2 is enjoying a lot of success. A lot of people are really having a great time, and they are choosing to, quote, beef up its content plans for the Sony published shooter. Since its release last week, the co-op game has attracted over 200,000 concurrent players on Steam alone. I think it's actually higher now. Helldivers 16 hours ago reached an all-time peak of 255,000. It's growing. And we're not even in the weekend yet. This weekend, it's probably going to be over 300. Easy. Like, absolute madness. So they've enjoyed fantastic success. Everybody's loving the game. And as a result, they're like, let's capitalize on this. And they're adding more teams. And as they say, with the success of Helldivers 2, we're going to start looking for more amazing developers that can help us accelerate and beef up our content plans, said the CEO of the studio. Jobs will be going up soon, but if you're a senior dev, there's always an open application. Enlist today with Arrowhead Game Studios. The Sweden-based Arrowhead Studio currently employs over 100 people, according to its website. And yeah, they've also been updating patches and releasing all of that stuff, which is good to see. And I mean, there's all sorts of potential updates for this. One of the most obvious things that they could do to retain players is to double down on this idea of real-time invasions, basically. So if you're not familiar with how Helldivers 2 works, so this is kind of how it works. So they have a Galactic War map that you select missions on. So you kind of tab through difficulty down here, and higher difficulties give you better payouts of XP, of these requisition papers that you can use to redeem on for different things, and of course XP and stuff like that. So you're incentivized to go on higher difficulties. You can quick play to quickly join another game that somebody else is running and basically fill in the rest of their party if they have it open. But the broader kind of meta mechanic is that you are a Helldiver fighting in the Galactic War. And you see each of these zones. So this zone is all Terminids, and then this over here is the automatons. What's interesting about this is that in real time, every time you complete a mission, this stat will change just a little bit. And in theory, everybody playing the game together is actually affecting these stats. What they're able to do is they're able to create these sort of like scripted updates to the Galactic War map where they can be like, oh, the automatons have invaded this zone right here, and then this zone, they've gotten closer to Earth. And you can also see that Super Earth has its own liberated stat, meaning and suggesting that you could actually have a season update where automatons or bugs reach Super Earth and you have to do missions on Super Earth to defend it, which could be super, super cool. But you also notice huge sections of the map that are currently completely empty. Now, the original Helldivers had more factions. So these like alien things holding their alien spaghetti-like appendages on the WMD trigger. Highly sophisticated, their civilization has endured for several hundreds of thousands of years. They call themselves the Squith, or Squith. I don't know, originally aquatic, these creatures dressed in ceremonial robes have managed to create a vast and extremely complex neural network for space travel. The species have taken their tentative steps towards the stars, produce weapons of mass destruction on a large scale, and as such is something that the people of Super Earth cannot ignore. And there's all sorts of different classes of these guys that you would fight in the base game, the original game. They're pretty much entirely absent in Helldivers 2. One of the things people think that they're going to do is that they're going to introduce more of these factions into the Galactic War, and so there will be new groups to fight, new enemy types, and there's the potential to even like cause overlap where maybe Terminids overlap with automatons, so then there's missions where there are bugs and automatons in the same mission fighting each other and then also fighting you. It could turn things into pure chaos very quickly, and it could be really, really cool to see how it develops. So there's a lot of potential for long-term support and for things to grow and change. And it seems like, you know, they're being given a blank check by PlayStation to figure it out and to support the game, however, because this is exactly what PlayStation has been hoping for. They've been hoping for the opportunity to go in and have a live service game that players are excited to play continually, and especially a live service game on PC that's not dependent on their own hardware. Like, PlayStation has been wanting to see this expansion into the PC space, and they've managed to actually get it. In game, if you zoom in on the empty zones, there are lots of planets that just say they're 100% liberated. Yeah. Genuinely a good idea to just have outright multiple factions. It's one of those things you think, gee, if only Suicide Squad had thought of that as well. Yeah, just different types of enemies. And the big thing is that they fight and play completely differently. The Terminids play in those missions totally differently than when you go into missions with automatons. And that for me is what I like to see. Because when I'm feeling like, hey, I just want to get in close with a shotgun and go crazy, going and fighting against Terminids makes sense. Yeah, it's all bugs. You can get in there with a shotgun, just light it up. But when you're fighting against automatons, they have weapons, they have chain swords. It's maybe not a good idea to get close. And that's when you're going to be using more heavy weaponry to take them down. So it changes the approach for each. And with further factions that you could introduce, it could also change play styles even beyond that. And then when you add into it like different types of mixing and matching, where maybe, you know, you have these Illuminate guys come in and start invading from down here. Maybe they go into areas where the Terminids are, and then, you know, you have to worry about the bug meta, what you should do to fight the bugs on high difficulties, and then also this other faction that you have to find different abilities to use. It could be really interesting to see it. There's a lot of potential there for long-term support, because I do agree, like, in a few weeks, if nothing's really changed, I could see people starting to get a little bored, because it's just been the same waves and waves of enemies as they crank the difficulty and get higher and higher. I could see that getting a little bit frustrating. I could see that, but I think that they have so much potential that they could go in there and keep cranking it. Other people have said that, we had somebody in chat the other day say that the developers have said that only about 70% of enemies have been seen so far. And if that's the case, I'm here for it.
Dry Solo donated $19.99
Oh,
through
thank you, my
Super
friend.
Chat.
Jeez.
I strongly believe that horde, mission-based shooters work best with the live service model, as opposed to looters like Deep Rock, Zombies, and now Helldivers. Love your content.
Yeah, thank you, my friend, and very, very generous super chat. I agree. I think for these types of games, the live service model fits very well. It's just it's a perfect match, really, in a lot of ways. So with this, I think you're right. There are types of games that I think are better potentially with a well-funded and supported live service model. If they're able to introduce new factions, if they're able to introduce these kind of crossover missions and invasions of planets, I think you could see Helldivers 2 becoming better as time goes by, significantly better than it is now. And there's also the cool meta implications where it's like, hey, if all players are focused right here, then the developers can go either, whether it's a mechanical thing that they leave open-ended to let players actually influence, or they just see, hey, players are mostly doing the bug missions. Let's say that they cleared out these sections and pushed the bugs back, but then let's say automatons invaded all the way up to Super Earth and cause them to freak out and kind of balance it out that way. There's all sorts of ways that you could start to do sort of meta narratives on the large scale of like the Galactic War directly influenced and informed by player decisions. And I think that that's a super cool concept, to let players on the whole community and their actions and how they're playing the game, let that inform how the story develops in the game's world. I think that's such a cool concept. It's so interesting. It's so interesting. And it seems to be working really well. People are having a great time. There needs to be a difficulty in between medium and challenging for the robots. Oh, is it too big of a jump? I do agree challenging is a big leap. When you go for bugs from challenging to hard, that's also a pretty big leap. So maybe there's a little fine tuning, but it might also be just the DPS check. It might just be that they like the point of going to challenging is that they want there to be like some sort of, well, I guess just DPS check. I will say when we did a mission yesterday evening, it was a terminated mission, but we did a mission and we cranked the difficulty from challenging to hard, and it actually felt easier than challenging, which was weird. I think spawn counts were lower, so there were a couple of big guys on the map, but it felt easier because we just were able to avoid them with the mission objectives we had. So it wasn't that big of a problem, you know. But yeah, all of this to say, I am very happy to report that Arrowhead is staffing up. They're doubling down, hiring more people. They're supporting the game even further. The game is breaking records and reaching new all-time peaks, while other games that have released very recently in the same live service genre are just slowly collapsing like a dying star. And, you know, it's a little bit of schadenfreude because people were saying that I had been too mean towards this game. And now you see that it's just totally dying out. By some counts, this game has not even sold over 200,000 units. Like that for how much they marketed this game and spending basically 9 years with nothing else to show for that time from the studio, this can be classified as nothing else than a catastrophic failure. And then we see on the flip side, we see a game coming along in the form of Helldivers 2 and just dominating and showing if the core fundamentals of your game are great, nothing else matters. Like if the game is just fun, players will have a great time and will support it. You just have to focus on the core fundamentals of it. And if that's great, the game is going to be received well. Great. He took my thing.